The tale of Dagath is one of a false promise of true love. Dagath is a Warframe inspired by the Headless Horseman, a horror story and mythical figure with origins in Irish folklore. The Dullahan was one of the fairies, which appeared as a headless man riding atop a horse whilst carrying his head in his arms. As it rode through the night, now and again, the Dullahan would stop and call out the name of a person that crossed its path. The named person would then fall dead, and the Dullahan would ride again. This same spirit is seen in Scottish and German folklore, and the cultural spread of this idea is uncertain. It would, however, inspire the 19th century story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. One of the notable rules of the Headless Horseman from the stories is that it cannot cross over water, which may be the origin of Dagath's horse being named Ricali, freshness after rain. Though I don't recognize the cultural origins of this name, perhaps someone in the comments could uncover this one for us.
There was once a Dax cavalry woman, the lover of an Orican couple named Corfell and Aurelia. What was her name? We do not know, but they never used it. They called her by many pet names, though. For an exotic pet she was to them. Little Sweetness, Tender Petal, Wild Rider. Had a mere Dax been known to be engaging in relations with her betters, she would have been executed on the spot. But the couple's power and influence was such that the affair would never be publicly addressed. Still, they feared to use her name, for names have power. Many gifts they gave her, fine armor, rubido rings, and a horse of her own, on the condition that she never ever named it. Names were for people, not possessions, so long as it remained a mere nameless thing. She would never love it more than them. But the rider could not bear to deny her friend the simple kindness of a name. So she whispered into its ear, "You are Ricali, freshness after rain." And just as the couple had feared, she came to love the horse dearly. This was intolerable to them. The horse had to go. An accidental impalement was arranged. But fate played a cruel trick, and both rider and horse were impaled. Corfell and Aurelia hastened to her side. Ignoring the dying horse, they fretted over their lover as she coughed blood. Continuity was out of the question. In desperation, they turned to a certain expert and pleaded with him to let her live forever. He returned the rider to them, transformed to a warrior of living steel. Her sweet and pretty face looked upon them with a smile that would never fade. For all their talk of forever, they wearied of her immediately. Now that the relationship was no longer taboo, they abandoned it. Parties became awkward when the rider stood vacantly by, useless as an abandoned doll. She had to go. They agreed. So, arrangements were made with a master of industry, and the rider, all unknowing, accompanied the couple to a facility. She lay down obediently when instructed, showed no emotion when the restraints clamped her limbs, and made not a sound when the full force of the dissolution beam blazed through her head and out of the back of her steel skull. The couple were satisfied. Their sentimental mistake was dead, and furthermore, the smiling doll's face was erased. Now they could erase it from their memory. I doubt I need to tell you what faceless thing clambered jerkily from the facility's waste disposal heap in the still of a Nabarus night. How she sought for her Dax Nakana and found only the Overseer's whip-blade. Confused, vacant, she wandered. Why was she alone? Where was her loyal Rakali? She raged deep into despair and memory, and summoned up a ghost horse to run alongside her on the night winds. Now, at least, she was no longer alone. She groped for other memories, came up with hands overflowing with betrayal. When the morning sun rose on Corfell and Aurelia, they were faceless too, and quite still. After that, she wandered without purpose, and the legend of the Hollow Rider grew. And so we come to my part in her story. You must understand, dear, that it is terribly bad luck to be out on Nabarus with no gift to give a reveler. And yet, that was my plight as I stood, my old bones aching, before the dreadful figure on the road many years ago. I have no face, the figure before me seemed to say, in a whispering voice that spoke in my mind. I have no name, only a need. And you come before me, empty-handed, this Nabarus night. I do have one thing to give, if it please you, I said to her. My name. When you ride away, you shall be Dagath, and I shall be only grandmother. And that is the story of how I lost my name and kept my head. Though many others have since lost theirs. For with her name came a new purpose. Dagath, you see, means the mirror that accuses. They say that none can now look into the gulf where once her face was, without their own sins rising to accuse them, and a swift, sharp sentence following. A happy Nabarus to you all.
An unknown Dax once became the favored slave of two Orokin by the names of Corfell and Aurelia. This furtive Dax was maimed in a tragic and manufactured accident. To save their beloved Dax's life, they sought out a certain someone to transform this Dax into a Warframe. This certain someone is likely Balis, whom grandmother avoids naming because she has seen firsthand the power held by names. No longer possessing the beauty and the symmetry that the Orokin favored over truth, Aurelia and Corfell had this Warframe executed and discarded, now easily forgotten. Dagath was once grandmother's name. In willingly giving up her name, she saved herself from Dagath's yearly hunt. Continuing the Africana themes of the new war, here Warframe calls to mind the idea of Ren, one of the 8 aspects of the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul. Ren is the name, and names were believed to give a person their individuality, expressed as a part of the person's essence, and engraving a name on an object or statue would give that person a body to reside in the afterlife. One's name gave a person vitality in death, and thus was important to preserve in life. The Nabarus story ends when the headless Warframe is given the name name Dagath, the mirror that accuses, and thus gains the ability to punish the transgressions of those who stared into the void of her face. This is the origin of Dagath's second ability, Doom. Doom is likely inspired by another popular character inspired by the Dullahan, the Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is a 1972 Marvel comic wherein motorcycle enthusiast Johnny Blaze sold his soul to the devil and became something of a Grim Reaper. Ghost Rider's Penance Stare is a power that burns evildoers by igniting the person's sins, both Doom and the Penance Stare being cultural evolutions of the original Dullahan's ability to kill by calling a person's name. What makes for a less clear cultural illusion is Dagath's first ability, Weird Scythes. Weird is an old Anglo-Saxon word meaning fate, doom, and destiny, and has similar Proto-Germanic roots as the Anglo-Saxon verb weirden, meaning to become, and the Norse word for fate, Urdur, the name for one of the three Norn sisters. When a player uses the Doom ability, copies of these scythes also appear overhead the enemy and strike them after a short time. This one is a bit more tenuous, but I believe this part of Dagath's abilities is an allusion to the Sword of Damocles. Cicero is perhaps the single most influential philosopher on modern social and political norms. It is through Cicero that Stoicism was popularized through the Roman Republic. His speeches became the standard-bearer of Latin style by academics, and it is his 45 BC treatise called the Tusculan Disputations in which we find this story. The Tusculan Disputations were a series of 5 books written by Cicero to understand ethics in the context of mourning, following the death of his daughter Tullia, who died in childbirth. The books are titled as follows: On the Contempt of Death, On Bearing Pain, On Grief of Mind, On Other Perturbations of the Mind, and Whether Virtue Alone Be Sufficient for a Happy Life. The Sword of Damocles is one anecdote in the 5th book on virtue and happiness. In this story, a courtier named Damocles begged King Dionysus I of Syracuse to allow him to taste the luxuries of being a king. Dionysus lived a life of luxury for sure, but he also hung a sword above his throne by a single thread of hair. That way, should he have any enemies that would wish to kill him for his leadership, they could do so easily. After Dionysus agreed to trade places, Damocles was tortured by the anxiety of impending death and could not enjoy the luxuries of the throne. Damocles had many enemies from his unjust acts as a politician. King Dionysus had only ruled justly and thus had no fear when sitting on the throne. The Sword of Damocles, when taken as punishment for unjust deeds of the ruling class, thus becomes the perfect way to visually depict Dagath's Doom Stare as a punishment for the Orokin, who cared only for the trifling pleasures of their station and none at all for justice in politics. Thank you for watching, and stay true.